Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello.
Hello, doctor.
Okay, all right. So let us start with the lecture. Today we are going to cover the last lecture of this course, which is about promises, observables, as well as REST APIs. So we discussed about the promises in the last lectures as well. Promise is something that is returned by the service, which is being called whenever we try to access the service from the server. So basically, the services which is being provided by the server might take time. So a promise is a construct that is returned by that service to tell the app that I will return the certain results to you, whatever you have asked for, but don't block the app. So basically, the app will not be blocked and user can use it. It will be a responsive app. And whenever we use promise, we try to encode it, or we try to call such API calls or the services calls from the asynchronous functions, and we use await keyword in order to tell the compiler to only, I mean, not to wait until you get the result, just wait when you get the promise, and when the promise will be full. Once the promise will be fulfilled, you will get the result accordingly. And I mean, it allows the compiler to run the app, and the user can just use the app responsively. Now, apart from promise, there is another thing which is known as observable. Observable is something like promise is returned only once, but observable is a thing that the app is subscribed to. So basically, if you want a service, I mean, for a certain period of time, I mean, you don't just want one result to be returned from the service, rather you want to get multiple results with the passage of time. So in order to subscribe, so basically, in order to get that service from the server, we use observable. Observables allows us to subscribe to the service, and as long as your application is subscribed to that service, you're going to get results accordingly. Whenever they are computed, they're going to be returned. But in promises, I mean, the promise only return one value. So for example, if you see here in this diagram, let's suppose this is a service. This is our service provider. It can be Google Map, it can be Firebase, whatever. Now, our app requests some results from the service. Okay, maybe if it's a Firebase, I want to store data in it. I want to load data from it. So let's suppose if I want to load the data from Firebase, this Firebase is going to return me. For example, this is, let's suppose, a Firebase. It's going to return me a value. Now that certain value is returned to my app. I mean, it will be a certain value. Whenever it will be computed, it will be returned to my app. Okay. My app will not be waiting for it. Rather, my app will continue to work as it is, allowing users to perform their tasks accordingly. Now, if, for example, I want to read multiple values, let's suppose if it's a, let's suppose it's a service of, let's suppose, a weather station. Okay, weather server contains the weather report of each second. Let's suppose after 10 milliseconds, you get a new weather update at the server. For example, you want to check the weather for Abu Dhabi, and you will subscribe to the weather server, and that weather server will keep on updating after a certain period of time. It would be like in seconds or minute. It will update the values of the weather on the server, and you want to get those value. Whenever the value is updated in the server, you want to get it in your application because you're building a weather application, let's suppose. So for example, at particular instance of time, you will get value 1, then you want to get value 2, value 3, value 4. So until you are subscribed to that particular service, you want those values to be returned to you. Now, in order to implement this functionality, you use observable rather than promise. So observable is those collections which you can watch for the certain period of time until you are subscribed to it. And if you want to stop watching or getting the value from observables, you unsubscribe to their service. Now, each value, and this thing holds for promise also. So promise, when promise or observable return you anything, I mean, you get a successful capturing of the values at your application. However, sometimes there might be chances that the promise will return failure. Failure meaning the results could not be computed, the internet connection between your application and the server is abrupted, is changed, is disconnected, so on and so forth. So in those cases, your promise will return a error, a reject service to you that the connection has been broken, or your result cannot be computed, whatever the reason is. So you will get a error, for example, or a reject event. Similarly, in observable, whenever you observe a value, you either get the completed response from the observable, or you get the cancelled. Cancelled meaning, for example, either you cancel it, or either you, for example, either the observable cannot give you the value because of any error in the connection or whatever. So these are the two things that we return. Now, these promises and services is provided by the server, like Firebase, like Google Maps, like any weather station. So any server provide you promise as well as observable. But what if I want to implement my own promise? Let's suppose I am building an application that stores some data, and I can share that data with other applications. Now, in such scenarios, I need to make a promise or observable myself. How can I make it? So instead of just relying on the promises and observable provided by other servers, we can also build our own promises or observable. Now, how can we build our own promises and servers? I'm going to show you. So basically, when you want to build a promise, you need to, that promise can return you a successful event or a resolved event. You can call it a resolved event. Resolved event will tell you that, okay, the result which you wanted, you got those results. Please mute your mic. And similarly, the promise can return you a reject event. In the reject event, basically reject event is that event in which your result could not be computed due to any reason. For example, your internet connection is broken, or your result cannot be computed due to some computational error, so on and so forth. Now, in those scenarios, I mean, you need to handle those issues in your application. So one way is that you think that you will get the promise, you will get your results. You can just put await in a asynchronous function, and then you can get the result. But what happens if you don't get a result? So when you write a promise, you can write this then function. This is a function which is executed when your promise is fulfilled. Okay. Once your promise is fulfilled, this then function is executed, and you can do your task which you want when your event is successfully completed, or when you get the data successfully. But let's suppose if you don't get your data, then this reject service is executed. And to know in your application whether you get a rejection service, you need to add this catch function. This catch function will give you, I mean, this will catch your error, and then you can display the issue to the user. For example, internet connection is broken, reconnect again, or whatever. If you want to display those messages to the user because the promise cannot be fulfilled due to any reason, any technical issue, you can put this catch block and you can show it to the user. And you can put this finally block. Now, this finally block comes irrespective of your promise is fulfilled or not. So even if your promise is fulfilled, your then will be executed, and then finally function will also be executed. Similarly, if your promise is not fulfilled, then this catch will be executed, and this finally will also be executed. So finally will execute in any case, and then finally you can put that, okay, you got your result, the promise service has been completed, whatever. If you want to just tell the user, you can do such, you can put such kind of notification in a finally. Now in observable, the structure of the observable is a bit different. So if you see here observable, now if you want to get the values from observable, you need to subscribe to it. Let's suppose there are 3 subscribers. who have subscribed to observable. Now observable is going to broadcast the values uh, to all of the 3 subscribers. So whoever subscribed to the observable, he will get that particular application will continuously get the values from the observable until that particular application unsubscribe to the observable. Okay, so observable is a different thing. For example, if you want to get continuous values from any service that is provided by any server, you use observable. And if you want to just get the value only once, you use promise from the data from the server, from any server. Now, what if you want to define your own promise or define your own observable? How can you do it? So let's suppose if we want to provide a service to any application, not particularly my application, but to any application. So what I can do is let's suppose I defined my class data service, and this is the object of the class with a small d. Now get data is a function in my own service class. Okay. Now this get data function returns promise. This is the same thing like which we created service for the local storage, for remote storage. Okay, this is the same thing. So we are creating our own service, and in the class of our own service, we have a function get data. Now this get data function returns the promise. It doesn't return the value exactly. Okay, it returns a promise. So that whenever any other application want to use our service, they can also use it, but they actually handle it with a promise. So basically, we will not return them exact value, we will return them as a promise. So this get data function is a function that I wrote in my own data service class. And this data service class is going to return a promise. Now, if I want to handle that, so basically, if I want to use the service that provide me a promise, I can put dots. So after calling this function, I can put this dot then function. And in that dot then function, basically, I will write the piece of code that I want to execute whenever the promise is fulfilled. So I told you whenever, then is an event that then is a function that you call when your promise is fulfilled, and catch is a function that you call when you get an error. So in the case, for example, if your promise is fulfilled, you will get some data. So in the then event, you check if you get the data and you store the data in your class, and you also print here the data which you got. Okay, we are doing nothing else. We're just storing the data and displaying it on the application. This is a simple thing which we are doing. You can put any code, for example, that you can put here any code that you want to execute when your promise is fulfilled in the then function. Similarly, we also add a catch function. In the catch function is executed when your promise is not fulfilled. So once your promise is not fulfilled, you will get some kind of error from the promise also, from the server also. That error message will tell you the reason why your promise was not fulfilled. And then you can print that issue to the user. So basically, let's suppose if your internet connection was broken, or there is any other technical issue, you can just print that issue to the user to alert the user, and user can take the appropriate action in order to remove that issue. Okay, and then you can put finally also here. After catch, you can put finally. Finally is executed regardless of your promise is fulfilled or not fulfilled. This is just to showcase that the activity related to getting or fetching the promises completed. You can put such kind of messages in the finally block. Now, contrary to the promise, there is another thing which is observable, which we discussed. Now, observable is used whenever you want to continuously get any service from the server. Let's suppose HTTP is a service. HTTP means hypertext transfer protocol. This is a service if I want to get anything from the web server. If you want to get any data from the web server, you use HTTP service. Now here we are using HTTP service, and given the location, for example, website link or web app link, given the URL of the particular web server, we are getting some data via HTTP protocol. Okay. Now this HTTP protocol doesn't return a promise. Basically, this get function that we have in the HTTP protocol doesn't return a promise. It returns the observable. So once that observable is returned, so we don't use then, we use subscribe. So basically we subscribe to that observable. So whenever there is a change in the value, we get that change immediately on our application. So when we subscribe, we get some data And for example, if we get some data, we are just printing the data on the console in our application. Or in the case of any error, for example, if the data, this is the same thing. For example, once the data is, I mean, when you observe, or sorry, when you subscribe to the observable, in the case of complete event, you get the data and you display the data accordingly. In the case of cancelled event, due to some reason, you will just print that reason on the console to the, I mean, on the application console to alert the user. Now, both, if you see both codes, I mean, the code are doing the same thing. Basically, they are just getting the data, and if they get the data, they're just printing it in the application. Otherwise, they're printing the error. But both will give you different results. Why? Promise will give you just one result. Observable is going to subscribe your application to the server, and whenever there is a change in the server, you're going to get the new values accordingly. Okay, so it's going to watch the observable, and then it's going to get, I mean, the observable is going to give the data whenever there is a change in the data to all of its subscriber. So you can subscribe and you can get the data. If you get the data, you can just display it. If you, due to some reason, if you don't get the data, just display the error message. Any question? Anything not clear in this? Now, you can, I mean, you might have studied that in loops or in if else, you can nest the if else. For example, if you write any if statement, if any statement you write, in this if statement, you can write another if statement also. Okay. This is known as nested if statement. You nest if inside a if. Similarly, you can write a loop, for loop, for example, inside a body of another for loop. That is known as nested for loop. Basically, you can nest different programming construct inside the same construct. Similarly, you can nest promises also. So when you nest promise, meaning you first of all, you watch over one promise, and if that is successfully executed, you launch another promise. And that if that is successfully executed, you launch a third promise. If third promise doesn't fulfill, you can launch another promise also as a kind of error in the error, for example. So this concept is known as consecutive promises. So when you call one promise, it's not exactly nest because you're not putting a promise inside a promise, but you are putting a promise after the completion of one promise. So once one promise is executed, based upon its result, whether the promise was fulfilled or not fulfilled, you put a second promise. So how do you put, for example, let's suppose if there was first promise, if it is successfully completed, I need to launch second promise. How can I do it? So in the then block of the first promise, I'm going to put the second promise. So once the first promise is executed, execute the second promise. This is known as consecutive promise. So let's suppose I have an initial task. Okay. Then based upon initial task, I need to execute the next task. So how can I do it? So let's suppose here I have a promise. This is my first promise. Now I expect that this promise might return me the result which I want in the case of resolve event, or it will give me a reject event if my promise is not fulfilled. So the promise, I mean, in this promise, what I'm doing is I'm just providing this value 100. This is an integer value that I'm providing. So whenever an application call to my promise, I'm creating this promise here. This promise is going to return a 100 value. Okay. There is no rejection here. If you see, I just added a resolve. So which means what? Whatever application who will call this function, for example, this promise, will always get a resolve state because I'm just returning a constant value 100 out of this promise. So every time I will give to the application the 100 number, okay, and I will resolve it. Now, if you see here, this is the promise that I created, and I stored it as a my promise with a variable name my promise. Now I'm saying that after once my promise is executed successfully, and how am I doing it? By putting a then block. So once my promise is successfully executed or promise is successfully fulfilled, I will get a value, this 100 value here. I am storing that value in val. So val will be, whenever my first promise will be executed successfully, I will get val equals to 100. And in the second promise, this is the second promise which I'm writing. I'm incrementing the value by 200. Okay. So once this promise is, the second promise is fulfilled, I'm just printing the value. Or if I get some error, I'm catching the error, I'm displaying the error. Now in this, there will be no error. There will be never an error that you get because you always return 100 value, which will resolve your promise. So there will be no errors at all. But still, if you want to catch, it's a good practice to write a catch. You can catch the error and you can print it to the user. Now, if you execute this code, what will happen? First of all, this promise will be executed. This promise will print, I mean, when you come to its body, you will print this message on the console, do demo to show promise in TypeScript. And then this promise will return a value of 100. It will return the value of 100 here because here I'm calling a then function. And inside a then function, I'm calling another promise. So here I'm getting the value that will be returned as 100 will be stored in this val. And I'm incrementing this 100 value with 200. So basically now I get a 300 value. Now this 300 value will be returned from this function and it is from second promise and it goes to the third promise. In the third promise, I'm just printing the value. So basically I will print this statement value from the promise function is this val and this val will have a value of 300. So this will be displayed and this catch will not be executed. Why this catch will not be executed? Because both of the first promises are returning a resolved state. They're not returning any errors. Any question in this? Anything not clear? Similarly, we have another piece of consecutive promise code here. Now here I'm declaring the first promise. And in the first promise, I'm printing the same message, demo to show promise in TypeScript. But instead of resolving it and passing 100 value, I'm just rejecting. I'm saying that this is a reject response from the promise. So this promise, this first promise will always return a reject state. So you will get a reject state always. So if you subscribe, or sorry, if you add another promise to this promise, what will you get? You will get a value and the value will be this string and you just printing that value. So this value will be printed. So in this, for example, when you go here, you create your first promise. Now this first promise returns a reject state. So when it returns a reject state, then this then will not be called. See? And once this then will not be called, this then will not be called as well. What will be called? This catch will be called. Why this catch will be called? Because the first promise is not returning a resolve state, it's returning a reject state. So then is not executed when you get a reject state from a promise. So a catch will be called, and when you call this catch, is error will be shown. So basically, first of all, you will see this line. This line will be called demo to show promise in TypeScript, and then this reject will be passed and to the next promise. And since we are passing a reject state, a error, so this then will not be executed. This then will not be executed. This catch will be executed. And once this catch will be executed, the same message, this is the reject response from a promise, will be displayed here after this line. So basically, you will write inside error block, and then you will write your message here. This is the reject response from a promise. Okay, so this statement will be displayed and it will be displayed in a red color because this is an error, a reject state that you're returning from the promise. Any question? Anything not clear in this? Similarly, you can put the promise inside a next promise. So this is a promise one. This promise one will return a value. So once this is successfully executed, this then will be called. You'll get the value of the first promise, and then you can pass it to the next promise, which if successfully executed will be passed the second promise value. And the second promise value can be passed to the third promise. Now in the third promise, you can get its value. And here you're just displaying the value of the third promise. So basically, the output that you're going to see from this, from these three consecutive promises will be the output of the third promise. Any question? Anything not clear? Anything not clear? All right. Now this is an example of another consecutive promise. So here I'm creating the first promise. Now in the first promise, I'm saying that you get a reject or resolve state. By the way, this is a JavaScript code, but this is similar to TypeScript. So basically, you are returning a resolve or reject state. Now, basically, this function will always return you a resolve because you're not handling a reject state. So, but this you're putting a timer here. So you will resolve this promise with a value of 1 after 1 second. So basically 1000, this 1000 is millisecond. So 1000 millisecond is basically 1 second. So after 1 second, you're resolving this first promise with a value of 1. Now you are putting a then here to launch a consecutive promise. Now here you're getting a result. This result will be the result of the first promise. Basically, this result will have a value of 1. Okay. So once my first promise is successfully executed, execute a second promise. In the second promise, I'm just displaying the value to the user. Now this is the same thing as console.log in JavaScript. You use alert to print it. Now here you're getting a value of 1 from the first promise and you're multiplying it by 2. So basically now your value will be of result will be 2. This 2 will be passed here to the third promise. Now in the third promise, what I'm doing is I'm printing the value of 2 and then I'm multiplying it by 2 also. So 2 into 2 is 4. This 4 will be returned to the fourth promise, and in the fourth promise I'm displaying the value of 4 and I'm multiplying it by 4 again. So this will be 8. But there is no next promise. So there are 4 consecutive promises. So the final value that will be displayed to the user will be 4. Although you will get 8 value, but there is no next promise in the pipeline to display that value. So the values will be displayed like 1, 2, 4, so on and so forth from this code. Anything clear? Anything not clear? Okay. Now, why we studied observable and promises? Promises, I mean, we have already used them and we have studied them. But why we studied observable is that we want to use observable in order to get the values from the web server. Now, in order to get the values from the web server, we use REST API. REST API is a API. Any question? If you have any question, please speak because
Doctor,
no,
is like observable included in exam
no,
two,
it will
or is
be. I mean, this lecture will be included in final, but not in exam two. So
but
exam
promise
two
is there,
content
right?
is already displayed in the Teams group. That is the same. There will be. I mean, observables are not included in the, and also the REST API is not included in the exam two. It will be included in the final.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Okay. So, sir, REST API is a API like Google Map API. Google Map also has an API, application program interface, that allows you to use Google Map functionality in your application. Similarly, if you want to use REST API in your application, you can use, the REST API in order to, for example, if you want to fetch any service from the web server, okay, or any, for example, web server created to handle any particular application task, you can use REST API in order to fetch that information. For example, there are many, in your mobile phones, for example, whether you have Android or iPhone, you have a weather application. Now, in that weather application, what you do, I mean, what typically you see is the weather and also the probability of rain, or for example, what will be the probability of the, for example, weather in, for example, next hour, next 2 hour, or next day, or next week, so on and so forth. Now, that information is not, developed in the weather application, which is provided by iOS or Android. There are web servers that contain that information. So basically, the weather information is computed by a weather department, okay, and that weather department puts the weather information after every, for example, I don't know, minutes, or for example, after an hour or whatever. So after a certain period of time, they update the weather values. Now, those weather values are fetched by the application, weather application that is developed in the iOS or Android. Now, how do you get that information in your application? That information is stored on a web server. So, in order to get the values which are stored on the web server in your application, you need to use REST API. So, I mean, like for example, if you want to use map in your application, what you will do, you will use the Google Map API. Okay. Similarly, if you want to get any service which is stored on the web server, we need to use REST APIs. Now, REST API, how do you use REST API? We're going to see this. Basically, now in this, for example, lecture, we're going to develop a weather application. So what is a weather application? Weather application is an application that shows the weather. For example, the same, it's like the same application that we have in our phones, like in Android and iOS. I mean, the only difference is that here we are going to display the weather of our own location. For example, we are located in, let's suppose, Abu Dhabi. So we are going to fetch our location, and from our location, we're going to fetch our, area where we're locating. Uh, for example, we are in, for example, Marur, or for example, we are in Mohammed bin Zayed city, whatever. So we'll get the exact location, and based upon exact location, we'll get the weather information from the weather server. That is a web server located in, for example, there are many web servers which are publicly available, but the one which we're going to use will be Meteo Blue. This is a server that contains the weather information of the world. So basically, we will get our location, for example, the weather information about our location, and also we will get the weather information about New York City. So what is the weather right now in New York City? We'll also get that information from the Meteo Blue server. It's a very popular server that contains the weather information. And from that particular server, for example, for Meteo Blue server, how we are going to get the weather information? We are going to use REST API and the HTTP protocol. So whenever you want to get information from web server, you need to follow a certain protocol. That protocol is HTTP protocol. And the HTTP protocol basically uses REST API inbuilt in itself to get the weather values. So in short, if you want to use REST API in your application, you need to include HTTP server protocol, and that protocol basically implements the REST API in order to get the information from any web server whose link you provide in the as a URL. So basically, the purpose of this app is just to implement a weather app, and you need to display that weather information on the M framework weather control. Okay, this is provided in M framework. We're going to use it. We're going to display the weather information of our current location, which we will fetch from geolocation, and we will also display the weather information about the New York City. Okay, now to get started, first of all, we need to download the MStarter app project. So you already know about this, and you install the requested libraries. For example, you can install Firebase if you want to store weather information. You can put this, although we are not going to store this information in Firebase in this application, we're just going to fetch it from the web server via REST API, and just we're going to use it. We'll not store the weather information in our application database. So this app, for example, if you want, so by default, when you download the MStarter app project, you see a title MStarter app. If you want to change it to Rain app or whatever you want to change it, you can put it like this. You can put features. For example, if we have a feature one, you can add it, you can remove it. These features are provided in app.component.html file of the MStarter app project, which you clone from the Git. And similarly, in the main page, let's suppose we create a feature one page. Now in this page, in the HTML file, we put the M container, then we put a heading, Abu Dhabi weather data, for example, and then we put two buttons here. Now these two buttons are linked to this or hooked to these functions, get location and get New York City weather. So these are the two functions that will allow us to get the weather information of our current location and also the weather of the New York City. Okay. I mean, these are two buttons which we hook with the click event of these buttons are hooked with these functions, and these functions are written in the feature one .typescript file. Okay. Similarly, below the button, we put our M framework weather component. It's known as M weather. So, and here for each of the weather that we fit, for example, here we have two weather, we're getting two weather objects, one weather object for the for our current location, and the second weather object will be for the New York City weather. So we have two weather. So basically this M weather, we are using ng4. ng4 is going to replace, it's going to show two times the weather component that we have added. So we are saying that for each weather data object, create a M weather component in the HTML instead of writing it two times. All right. So this is the code which we write in the HTML file. Similarly, we will create a weather data service file, weatherdata.ts, and in this file we just store the weather information. So this weather data object is an object of this class, weather data, and in this weather data class we have all of the information about the time, precipitation. What is precipitation? it's a probability of rain, whether you're going to get a rain or not. What will be the maximum temperature? What will be the minimum temperature? What will be the wind direction? What will be the rain spot? What will be the humidity level? So these are the information that we get from the web server, and we're going to put this in the weather data class that we create. This is the same class which we created. This is same like the item class which we created for the local storage or remote storage. This will allow us to store the weather information as an object, single class object. And similarly, here I'm initializing. So basically, in the constructor of this class, when I create an object, I pass the weather data object, and from that data object, I'm populating all of these fields, initializing all of these fields. Any question? Anything not clear? Now, here is the main thing. Here in the home.component.ts, or you can put it in feature.component.ts as well. First of all, we are importing the HTTP client. Now, this is the HTTP protocol which will allow us to fetch the information about the weather from the web server Meteoblue using REST API. And similarly, in the class, first of all, I'm declaring the list of weather data objects that will contain the weather information which will be fetched from the web server. I am also declaring latitude and longitude variable to get and store my location, which I will get from geolocation. Reverse geocoding. What is reverse geocoding? Okay, geocoding is a phenomena in which we can, if we have a latitude and longitude, we can get the place name. And similarly, if I have a place name, I can get his latitude and longitude. So there is reverse geocoding. I mean, there are two types of geocoding, reverse geocoding and forward geocoding. In reverse geocoding, you provide the latitude and longitude of a location and you get the name of the location. Let's suppose if I provide a latitude and longitude of Abu Dhabi University, and I pass it to the reverse geocoding API, which is provided by the Google Maps, I can get the name Abu Dhabi University of that place. And similarly, if I do forward geocoding, I can provide the name of the university. For example, I say Khalifa University. What will happen? The forward geocoding will give me the coordinates of the Khalifa University to me in my application. So here we will get, because we are getting our location using geolocation service. So basically, geolocation service gives us latitude and longitude. What we need to do is I need to get the name of the location on which I'm currently at, display it on my weather application. So the latitude and longitude which will be returned from the geolocation, I'm going to pass it to the reverse geocoding API, which is provided by Google Maps to get the location. Let's suppose if I'm located in Marur, so I know using geolocation, I can get my location, latitude and longitude. I will pass those latitude and longitude to the reverse geocoding app in order to know what is the area where I'm currently located at. Okay, so here this area information, for example, whether I'm in Marur, whether I'm in, let's suppose, Mohammed bin Zayed city, or wherever I am currently located at, the name of the location will be fetched in this string, and the name of this string is reverse geocoding URL. Similarly, I am getting the dates and dates time. This is to put in the weather application and also the address of my location. Now, since you import like the service, like the Firebase service, like the routing service, when you import it, you also put it in the constructor. Okay, and this is to initialize my default values of latitude, longitude, addresses, so on and so forth. And the weather object is empty by default. We are going to populate it later on. Basically, there will be two objects that we will be creating. First object will store the weather information about New York City. The second object will store the information about my current location, the weather information about my current location. So this function get New York weather is linked with the button here, get New York button, this button. So here I'm getting the coordinates of this is the hard-coded coordinates of New York City. Okay, I'm putting it as because they will not change. New York City coordinates will remain as it is. So I'm hard coding them. And here I'm calling this dot get weather data function. This is going to fetch the weather information using HTTP protocol, REST APIs. This is going to fetch the weather information about New York City from the Meteoblue web server. Now, the implementation of this function is provided in the next. I'm going to show you later on. So once if I press the button get New York location weather, I'm going to get the New York location. I mean, I'm going to set the latitude and longitude to the New York latitude, longitude, and I'm going to get the weather information. Similarly, if I press get my location weather, so this get location function will be called, since this is hooked to this button. So in this function, first of all, I'm getting my location. How am I getting my location? Using geolocation. So basically, I'm getting my current position. I'm updating latitude and longitude. I'm calling this function in order to display the weather information of my current location. Okay. Now, here is the main thing, get weather data function. Now, in this get weather data function, whether I'm getting the weather information about New York City or my current location, I am first of all, I'm calling this function. Now, this function gets the weather information, whether it's the location, my current location or New York City location, is going to get the weather information. So the first thing I'm going to get is using Google Maps service. Here I'm using Google Maps service. Here the key I'm providing. You need to update it based on your own key. I'm saying that use the service, reverse geocoding service provided by Google Maps, and passing this latitude and longitude, whatever the latitude longitude is. For example, if I'm getting my location, it will be my location. Latitude, longitude, if I'm getting the weather for the New York City, it will be New York City, latitude and longitude. So based upon the latitude and longitude, which I'm passing to this weather data function, for example, whether I have clicked the button get New York City weather or my current location weather, I will pass this latitude and longitude information to the Google Map service, that Google Map reverse geocoding service, to get the name of the city or name of the place where I am. So if I pass the coordinates of New York City, it's going to tell that this is a New York City using reverse geocoding API provided by Google Map. If I'm passing my location, so it will return the name of the my location. I mean the area, city, street name also, where I'm currently located at. So based upon the latitude and longitude value which I fetch from the geolocation is going to give me the information about the area where I'm currently located at. Okay, so first of all, I'm displaying this name. This URL will contain the name. Now, based upon this name which I'm getting, I am passing this name to the HTTP server to get the weather information. Now, as I told you, weather is something which is updated continuously. It's not a single value that you get. Basically, you need to get all of the continuously changing values because weather is updated periodically. Okay, so you don't need to. So this get function in the HTTP protocol for the weather is not going to return you the a promise. It's going to return you an observable, and once it's going to return you an observable, you need to subscribe to that observable. And once you subscribe, you just put that. If you get the city data, and when you print it on the let's suppose on the console, you will see this information. So city data is returned by the REST API, HTTP protocol, and it contains information like this. For example, if I click my current location, it will be like Abu Dhabi, UAE, Zayed City, so on and so forth. All of my location information I'm going to get here. Now here I'm going to get the formatted address. This is my formatted address. For example, Zayed City, Abu Dhabi, UAE. I'm going to put this in the address. This is going to display this address information in my mweather component that is provided in the M framework. And similarly, from this server, I'm going to get this server passing my current latitude and longitude. I'm going to get the weather information. Now, again, since this is a weather information, is going to give me I need to I need to subscribe to this get function because it's going to return me an observable. This is the same function as it is. So but we are getting the weather information now from the server rather than our location and the address. So here I'm saying that if I get a weather data, which looks something like this, initialize, if I get a weather data, if I have something on the weather data, remove it and input the information about my weather data like days, dates, and then call this function process weather data is going to fetch this information from this object of weather data that is returned from the web server and is going to put it in my M framework weather data. So here is the process weather data function. So I'm saying that for each of the information, I'm interested in these 11 information. I'm saying that get the day's time, put it as time, get the precipitation information, put it in the precipitation, temperature, wind direction, rain spot, all of this information that you fetch from the web server, MeteoBlue web server. For each object, create a new weather data object, and in that particular weather data object, you need to put that information which you fetch from the server and put it in our M weather control. And similarly, for each weather control, you're going to push it in the weather data object list that you created in your class. And that's it. So basically, once you run this app, you will, for example, when you have two buttons, get local weather, get New York City weather. If you click local weather, you're going to get your latitude and longitude, which we're displaying here. And you will also get this location. This is returned by reverse geocoding. So that based upon your latitude and longitude, you're getting your location that is displayed by reverse geocoding. So it's going to display here. And similarly, there will be a weather object. This is your weather. This weather component is, contained within the framework itself. And I'm displaying the temperature, date and time, the temperature minimum and maximum values, wind direction, wind speed, humidity level, rain region. So for example, if I am at the current location, the rain is most probably going to occur here. This is for my local data. Similarly, I can display the information about New York City also. So this is the second control that displays the same information about the New York City. If I click the New York City object. Any question? Anything not clear? Or anything you want to ask? Okay. Anything not clear? So this is the app. I'm going to share these slides with you. And then you need to go through these slides and you need to implement this app. I'm going to share this code with you as well. So this will be kind of your third assignment also. I will upload it on the Blackboard. So you need to implement this app and you need to submit it, show the screenshot as well. And that's it. This code, I'm going to share these files with you also on the Teams group, and then you can use it in order to implement the functionality. Instead of New York, I'm going to change the city here, a different city. But your location, your local weather will be based, the weather that you need to fetch from the geolocation based upon your current location. And you need to submit this. So any question, anything not clear? Anything which is clear? So that's the end of the course, basically. So this is the last topic, which, these are the last two topics. Promises, consecutive promises, observables, and the REST API. So these are the topics which will be included in the final note in exam 2. This is the pretty much the course. If you have any question, you can ask me on Monday. So in Monday, there will be no formal class, but I will be there. So I will be in the class. If you have any question, any query that you want to ask related to any topic, you can ask me in the class. You can come and you can ask me in the class, but there will be no formal class. So basically, it's a kind of a tutorial session. I will be there in the class. You can come if you have any questions, and you can ask. And on Wednesday, we will have exam 2 on 12th February from 10 to 11:15. And that's it. So that's pretty much it.
So
Any,
Monday, no
yes.
class. We don't have to attend the Monday's class.
No, on Monday, I will be there in the class from 9 to 12:40. You can ask any question if you have during that time. Otherwise, there is no class, basically.
Will you upload the code for this stuff, the weather data thingy,
Sorry?
and the app that is built by this, right? Is this
Yeah,
like
I'm going
something
to
like?
share this on the Teams group
Okay.
for this one, but I will also upload an assignment in which I will change the location, basically. Instead of New York, it will be from another city. So you need to implement that accordingly. Okay. Any question, any other thing? Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for your time. Best of luck for the exam next week. Thank you.
Thank you.